You're listening to Radio Aula Mundi.
Hi there, wherever you are. I'm Marco Rixecker, a freelance writer, reporter, producer, teacher, translator, tour guide, poet, singer, and songwriter. I speak several languages, and I'm the creator and founder of Radio Aula Mundi, an evolving podcast station where no language and all languages are spoken. It's a multilingual mix of music, poetry, lectures, languages, interviews, documentaries, recipes, and a lot more, co-produced with the students of the Aula Mundi International Cultural Center. You can find us on radioaulamundi.bandcamp.com, podcasts.apple.com, Spotify, YouTube, Breaker, Player FM, Facebook. Search Radio Aula Mundi. The following narrative includes excerpts from a collection of testimonies and interviews entitled Let's Talk About It Anywhere in the World, where it is all about people's voices, accents, and speech patterns, hand in hand with my own personal anecdotes and observations. In addition to that, people are free to introduce themselves and speak their minds openly in their respective, often indigenous languages and dialects without any paraphrases or expectations. So, let the story go on from there. Razorhouse is the brainchild of a man by the name of Mark Panick. He is a Chicago musician and songwriter, and I first see his name in a post by Brad Elvis of the Handcuffs, a Chicago band I've interviewed a while ago. One of Mark Panick's other musical projects is an Americana band by the name of Black Friars Social Club. What gets my attention in Brad's post is that after the release of the most recent record by Razorhouse, they're going to play a gig in an undisclosed venue. I check out some of Mark Panick's music and projects and find them pretty cool. In the process, I discover a man who seems to combine creativity and character. Eventually, I reach out and ask for an online interview with Mark Panick. Things go quickly after that, and we manage to set up a convenient day and time for both of us at different places in the world. Mark is sitting in his home when we get to know each other, and I ask him to introduce himself for the record.
Well, my name is Mark Panick. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, musician from Chicago, Illinois. Originally born on the south side of Chicago. Well, at the moment, Razorhouse, which is a band that's been around since '91, actually, just sort of rebirthed it maybe 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And then there's the Black Friars Social Club, which is an Americana sort of deal. Chloe from Brad and Chloe sang on that record. And Brad helped sequence this new Razorhouse record too. But those are the two main musical interests I have going right now. I have some minor recording side projects, but those two bands do the most sort of thing. And what I spend my time doing when I'm not doing music is my wife and I, in 2016, we formed a local community group called Refugee Community Connection. And it started out small. We were just helping Afghan SIV refugees because that's who we were connected with. They are refugees that helped the U.S.'s armed forces in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a few other places. And in turn for their work as interpreters, they and their families, after several years' service, are promised, immigration into the country. But when they come there's a lot of blank spaces, and we filled in those. So, we have a free store. And what started out in 2016 as a small organization now is over 7,000 volunteers. We're helping lots of families, and it's more than just Afghans now. It's Russians, it's Ukrainians, it's Venezuelans. So that takes up most of my family's other time when we're not enjoying music.
Mark Panick is sort of a man for all seasons. And to him, his community work, his music, and his art in general are one and the same. So the musical projects and your community project, are they connected somehow?
It bleeds over because it's us. And my wife was in the music business for 30 years. That's how we sort of grew the volunteer organization, is through our connections through the music community. And that without that, I don't, it would still be a couple hundred people. So that's a big reason why it grew. And Razorhouse is planning on doing a benefit for Refugee Community Connection with, I think the Handcuffs are doing it with us this summer at Martyrs here in Chicago. We don't have a date yet, but we've spoken to the owner about it, and we're starting to orchestrate the moving parts. They're definitely entwined and entangled. A lot of the music community, they're just highly empathic people. They're compassionate, and when we put the call out, they answered right away. I mean, right away. So, but even before that, I mean, and we see a lot of it now, and that is people that were doing well at one point. They hit a rough spot, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket for them. And there are people that have been in our music community for decades, and you can't just, you have to help them, and all the GoFundMe's, and we've done a few for different people and stuff like that. But without the community, we'd be in sorry shape.
Why Chicago?
Well, I think because of the particular kind of melting pot it is. It's not a melting pot like Los Angeles. It's more working class. It's more thick-necked. It's more salt of the earth, really. And I think it's because of that. In a lot of the communities, they're very ethnocentric. I've known the Ukrainian community here for decades, and they're very tight, but they're meshed with all the neighborhoods around them too. I mean, neighborhood festivals see a mixture of all kinds of cultural, music and art mixed together. But I think that's a big part of it. It is neighborhoods, and it is, they still retain a lot of their ethnicity, but we do mix. And it does seem to be more, certain neighborhoods mix more than others, but old ways die hard.
Which part of you is Chicago?
Which part of me is Chicago? Which part of me isn't Chicago? I mean, seriously, I was born on the south side of Chicago and spent most of my formative years on the southwest side. And I mean, our activity was riding our bikes from garage to garage to hear garage bands, and if that ain't Chicago, I mean, and yeah, I think it's just in you. And there's a difference between, the suburbs of Chicago and actually Chicago. And there's a big difference from the south side to the north side too. So, now I'm a north sider. I mean, I attach to the south side. I love it. Much of my family is still down there. It seems like I only go down there now for gatherings or sad occasions. But yeah, I'm a North Sider now. I'm refined.
How is life treating you at the moment?
Well, as long as I don't get on the bus in my full hockey gear, they treat me pretty well up here. Um, uh, life is treating me well. I have no complaints, and I love the city. I've moved away from it a couple times. I've tried to be away from her, and she calls me back to her rusty bosom. And I come, and when I'm gone, I miss the bus fumes. I miss the oddest things. It seems like whenever I move out of this town, if it's you end up in just a land of strip malls, and that's fine, but not after a while. So I'm drawn back to my city, and I'm lucky enough to be back here. And part of it is the creativity, and part of it is the community and the openness and the hugeness of it and the many different scenes. And now it's even more so. I mean, when I jumped into the music scene in the 80s, it was a small select group of punk rockers and Naked Raygun and the Effigies and the Bone Barumba and many other weird bands, and it was just a small group. Now it's massive. Alternative music in general is just massive. It's bled over into the urban culture now, and things are mishmashing together and becoming hybrid. It's beautiful. The art in this city can be breathtaking if you're adventurous enough to go out and look. You can't sit on your couch and wait for Netflix to make a Chicago art documentary. You have to get off your ass and get on a train or something and go to a gallery and expose yourself. Dip your brain in there.
Storytelling is quite important.
I grew up with those things. Story songs and stories were sewn into me as a young kid. I mean, and then growing up with an old Lithuanian great grandma, they just tell you stories about escaping the Bolsheviks, and but the story song thing that got into me early. I think my earliest memory is my mom, who got me in the Cub Scouts, and we did this jamboree, and she had us do the Johnny Horton song, Ballad of New Orleans. And that probably, I blame that, but it was probably more than that. There was, 16 tons and all those songs that when I was a little kid that came up. And, those, you get infected with that sort of fascination, and, but I love stories. And even my rock stuff, there's stories in there. They're just encoded differently, The Americana thing lends you to the American songbook. And, even though you don't have to pay attention to the rules, you kind of instinctively do, because, they're so ensconced in marble there. They're Johnny Cash and, Bill Monroe, and, how are you going to argue with those fence posts, So you just wrap your stuff around it, and, I do my own little odd version of everything, which suits me.
As part of my conversations with people, I often have them ask questions, either specifically for someone I know I'm going to chat with in the near future, or broadly for anyone I might speak with anytime, anywhere in the world. As a result, 3 questions are available for Mark Panick. The first comes from a fellow Chicagoan, a musician by the name of Mark Winnebal. His question and Mark Panick's answer are so inspiring that I'm going to have to ask some follow-up questions.
When you create art, do you have a recurrent character in your art? If so, tell me about it.
Oh, you know, I think I've only come to understand that a little bit recently, but you know, when I write, especially the Americana stuff, it seems like you write a part, and even if it happened to you, I remember it like a movie, and I play it with a certain character voice and a certain approach to it, and it's not something that I put a lot of excuse me, thought into. It just seems to naturally occur to me, and I think that happens in the writing process, and I think that happens as you develop the lyric. It's sort of like chiseling. I know it gets overused as an example, but you have this raw block that comes out of the ether, and some of it is well defined and other parts of it are not, and you just start hacking away, and sometimes you have to glue bits back on, and you know and as you do that, I think your filters and that develop those characters. I don't have like one particular one or anything like that, but I do notice there's voices that return, you know, attitudes, stances, you know, and those very much feel like a particular character, because they come back later and they have the same personality traits. So, maybe it's mental illness. I don't know.
When you hear those voices, what is the first musical instrument you feel like picking up?
Yeah, it's usually I already have a guitar in my hand, so that it goes there. But I try to force myself off my comfort square, and I have started songs on just drum loops, and I have started songs on just piano melodies too. Um, rhythm seems to really help me a lot. So even if I am hacking away at the guitar, it starts out in a rhythmic sense, and then the melody develops from there. Every once in a while, the melody comes in. Sometimes rarely, but in that Americana, in the Black Friars band, there's a song I wrote for I lost two siblings in the past 6 years, and my little brother who I lost, I wrote a song for him, and he was like a metalhead. I mean, Deftones was his favorite band. And as after he passed, I had no intention. Oh, I'm going to write a song for my brother, but this thing just sort of came out of me, fully formed, like a fully birthed kid. And it was based on when he was a kid. He had a kid gang called the Junior Hitmen. They thought, this is like about fifth grade too. They had little jackets with it silk screen on their back. So naturally, we could never let him live this down. He heard about it at his wedding. I mentioned it in his eulogy. That's how insensitive we are. But so I wrote a song for him called "Ballad of a Junior Hitman," and it, it's not something, he would have liked it because he liked good story songs too, but it was definitely not a Deftones song. But it goes back to those structures we were talking about earlier about the difference between roots music and, say, maybe experimental rock or something along those lines.
So when you start out with a song, how do you know, or when do you know which musical project it's going to end up in?
Oh, it's sort of obvious, kind of. There has been a few that waffled back and forth. I mean, Black Friars does do a few early Razorhouse tunes, and they're ones that lend themselves more towards that treatment. and it's really good exercise for your brain to reimagine your own stuff, because it doesn't come natural at first, but the more you push it along, it's like, oh, okay, again, the creative process, but those are just preconceived notions. You get to live with these songs, and they are, again, back to characters. They are like these, weird children that you made, and they just sort of wander around in your psyche. And you're like, oh, that's Pugsley. He wears that every day, So then when you change his clothes, it's like, oh my gosh. And then he becomes daddy's favorite for about 10 minutes. Like, oh, look at my new song. That's my old song,
How visual is your music?
Well, I think I've been told, and I believe it's very visual. I mean, I've been making Super 8 movies since I was a kid. It's how my mind thinks. And, usually with my songs, I see some sort of video treatment for it almost immediately. There's 4 different videos for the new Scolds Bridle Razorhouse record, and I'm proud of every single one of them. 2 of them are animated, and so yeah, I've been told that, and I've worked with a few different artists. John Arrow, he did a video for the Black Friars song Perdition's Hill, that's an animated, beautiful. His stuff is just beautiful, and then when you see it animated, it has a real unique character, all hand drawn stuff, and it's very nice. Very nice. But yeah, I think in very visual terms. I think in, a lot of my stuff to me sounds like film treatment stuff, like it could just slide into some indie film. Hasn't happened yet, but you never know.
So if you could choose a song or two of yours that would make it into the movies, which would it be?
I think one of them would be Perdition's Hill, the Black Friars song. And I think something off the new Razorhouse record. Probably Scolds Bridle, the title cut. I think it lends itself towards that, and it has a philosophy built into it. And if you listen to it, it's enough poetry where it's not a pop song. You can come away with your own interpretations. But those are the 2 I'd pick now. But I think a lot of the stuff I work on can be utilized in that capacity. I did have a sync license guy for a while. He's retired now. So I'm open to any new folks that come by, but that business has changed too. The music, to be honest, I'm not that interested in the business of music. It's the same thing, and with the refugee community connection thing, that people are still trying to say, you should have a bank account, you should be a 501(c), you should be this. And we always said we didn't want to get into the business of helping refugees. We just wanted to help refugees. And with music, I really don't want to be in the business of making music. I just want to make music with my friends, and I want to do creative, cool projects and come up with crazy merch. And but in this world, you don't really get that option on this front, on the musical front. If you want people to hear your stuff, you have to put on the peanut selling uniform and get your peanuts here, I got your music, and you just have to do that. You just have to carry that shame.
The next question comes from a poet based in Richmond, California. Her name is Dorian Lax, and she has a question only a poet could ask. Mark Panick's answer is going to trigger a longer discussion between him and me, about his immediate surroundings in his hometown, Chicago.
What is the window you most looked out of? And of course, it can be a real window or it can be a metaphorical window.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Metaphorical window. Well, the past 10 years of my life, after losing my father, I saw how he left this world, and I decided that I wanted to work on the structures that were going to make it different for me when I left this world. And I started doing something that friends of mine have been telling me for decades, and I started meditating. So metaphorically, I try to remind myself to look out the window of self-awareness and to see where I'm at the time, and to not get caught up in the streams of, just unnecessary, excitement. But the actual window I look out the most is the window that's right here to my left, and that is my son's window in his bedroom, which is my reading room. I have a self-care thing that I do every day I possibly can. I start my day out with some reading, and I sit here and read with my cats, who don't read. And those are my two windows, I think. Those are my two windows. And my meditation window is filled with possibilities. I see really positive things in it, and a lot of really hard things have happened to me and my wife in our life recently. But I still feel that positivity, and I feel it when I look out that window. I feel it now looking out the window.
So, when you look out your window, what do you see?
Well, I see a lot of old Chicago mixed with new Chicago. I live in what's called a workman's cottage. We've made it a little bit nicer than a workman's cottage, but there's working poor on my street. I know, I see them go to work every day, roofers. And I know I've been one of those people. I know what it's like to live that kind of job. You maybe save for a vacation once a year, but that's about it. And then there's, houses down the street that are worth obscene amounts of money already, and this is Chicago now. Everything has been spread out. And, but that's not all I see. I see these old houses, and I see the woman we bought the house from, and she lived here since 1943. And she was a religious woman, and because of my bias against organized religion, I had just assumed she was a toady, kept under wraps type lady. And nothing could have been further from the truth. She was a botanist, and she loved wildlife too, so she had been taking care of a feral cat colony here since then. So when we bought the place 12 years ago, they were just here, so we continued to feed them, and we make shelters for them in the backyard and stuff like that. So usually in the morning, I see one or two of the ferals straying across the street here, coming to our food bowl, which I know has got the good stuff in it, at least for a street cat. That's one of the things I see. I see the high school kids going to high school and in all their high-low fashion. And then I see the working folks trudge off to the bus stop, And then I'd see my son go to school back when he was going to high school. Now he's in college. But I see life. I see the bloodstream of the city, you know, pulsing around here. And I mean, we live on the north side, but I mean, there's regularly shootings down our street, sad to say. I mean, 4 days ago, someone was shot and killed just a block and a half away on Montrose and uh, what was it, Drake? I don't know. One of the streets nearby here. But you know, it's not idyllic. I don't know a city that is now. I think it speaks of more where we are in the human condition. God, I wish somebody had some answers for that. I certainly don't. But we still consider ourselves lucky that we have this place, and that you know, we're in a city, and a part of the city too that is more culturally diverse than any neighborhood in the country, from what I've heard. Because you can go 2 blocks and get Persian food, then Vietnamese food, and it's lovely. And you know, those people are living here too. It's not just they're not just running shops here. So it's a nice mishmash. And the church where we run one of our free stores for the Refugee Community Connection is 2 blocks away. And, you know, if you would have told me when I was 21 that I was be willingly traipsing into a church every week, and I would have scoffed. Being a fallen Catholic.
What's the coolest sound you've heard recently, and how could you play it on a musical instrument?
Well, I remember when there was a lot more industrial sort of businesses, you know, in corridors around Chicago. Now they're all pushed out into the suburbs, but there used to be, there's still some strips, especially down on the south and west side. But I used to love those metal stamping machines, you know, which of course led me to a natural love of Einstürzen and Neubauten and Test Department and stuff like that. And I adopted those sounds in my music, but that was 1987, you know. Now the sounds I think are more coming from my soul than externally. The external thing feeds into my filter makes the other sound that actually gets recorded. But there's sounds around me that I love in the city and for example, which is it, the second Razorhouse EP, I think. We tracked some tracks here in the city. What was the name of the studio? King Size. And there's quiet parts in the sound where I can actually hear the bus stop out in front. And you hear this, like, you know. And at first, you know, I was flabbergasted. Oh my gosh, this unwanted artifact has made its way into my piece of art. And then I realized that unwanted artifact is a great addition to my art. It doesn't have to exactly pertain to the narrative quality of it. It's you know, a piece of the smell of it, you know. And so the beauty of mistakes.
The last question for Mark Panick, asked by someone else, comes from an indigenous rapper by the name of John Paul. It causes another discourse and discussion full of cultural, literary, musical, and artistic references.
I would ask, you know, the main one that comes to mind is just, you know, who are your inspirations, or who was foundational in helping you to get started on your path, and who can you give credit to that helped you along the way and got you started and, you know, inspired you to do whatever it is that you do?
Wow, that's a long list. I mean, if you've been around as long as I have, and you're as curious as I am, you subject yourself to a lot. And you know, it goes across the spectrum from musical artists like the Ink Spots and the sensational Alex Harvey Band, and to filmmakers like Alejandro Jodorowsky and oh my gosh, Stephen Sayadine, who turned out to now be a fan of mine too. That's a special treat when that happens. Visual artists, Jean-Michel Basquiat, you know, I love his messy street style. I like his lines. I like Keith Haring's lines. I really I was drawn to the surrealists at a very young age. That's filled me with wonder and sort of made a lot of impact on my early band, the Bonemen of Barumba. It's in some of those videos. You know, you can see my attempts at embracing my surrealist brothers. So yeah, it's a broad spectrum, and then that's not even getting into the literary aspects of Pablo Neruda, and let me see who else is around me here. James Joyce and Alan Watts, William Blake and Arthur Rimbaud and Walt Whitman and a few hundred beat poets as well. But it all fills my well, and then it stews in that well, and then I draw it out in sections. And, you know, sometimes you draw it out and it just comes apart like liquid, and other times it, you know, oh, I see something here. And then you make something, you know. Sometimes it's a collage. Sometimes it's physical, you know, a sculpture or a painting. I haven't painted or sculpted in a while, but I enjoyed doing it years ago. And I always thought I would do it again when I felt like the musical pipeline dry up. I don't know why one has to stop and one has to start. I don't know why that is. Maybe it doesn't. I'm a big believer in that just fill the well, disgorge the well sort of theory, you know. And it's always a matter of having enough patience when you're filling the well, because you've just usually disgorged the whole mass into some project or 2-3 projects or something, and then you're like, oh, you're eager to start again, and you know the well's not full. The well needs to be full. So you're like, okay, well, and really you can't just turn on a faucet. You just have to live. And living, you know, the governor of that, sometimes it's gushing in there and other times it's just a trickle. Yeah. But then it invariably fills up again.
What are your two most opposite influences?
Ah, wow. That deserves a second of thought. Two most opposite influences. You know, that's a trick question. Maybe not intentionally, but I was just going to say something along the lines of like you know, like the Residents and you know, like the Ink Spots, you know. I mean, but really I can see parallels and similarities between those. And I'm sure some people would be just like, oh, no, absolutely not. You know, one's musical, one is just, I don't know, you know, people, the opinions, you know, they look through their prism, they see what they see. So yeah, opposite end, boy. You know, I think I might have something for you. But it's more ethereal and loose than like a particular this and this. And that is my fascination with the ugly and the raw and things with a horrible tinge to it. Things like G.G. Allen, you know, and his crazy music and his crazy visual performances. You know, I could be drawn to something like that. The fascination of it, you know, And you could put Neubauten and some of those bands in there too, the Chaos and Sparks and Fire and everything else. And then, Harold Budd. I mean, beautiful ambient music that just I feel like I'm like the pearl in the Prell bottle, just floating, suspended, held by his lovely melody, and then I can turn around, get out, wipe myself off, and go to the filthiest, and find enjoyment in that as well. So I think that's a pretty broad spectrum. I don't know if everyone's psyche is set up that way, but mine is.
Who would you like to chat with now or have dinner with later today?
A Polish poetess named Wisława Szymborska. A very dear friend of mine turned me on to her. It's got to be 8 years ago now. She won a Pulitzer Prize, and she's just an amazing poet. But her wry sense of humor that she would look at life through, and bring to in just a word, not beat you over the head with it, but just like a come along, just bring you with a word and into a picture and into a place where you would recognize in yourself. And she just touched me, and I read all her stuff, and now there's no more to read.
So if you had this opportunity then to chat with her, what is the first question you would like to ask her?
I would ask her if she regards the conversation of ants. It's my way of asking a metaphorical question.
Music is going to be a prominent topic during the conversation between Mark Panick and me, with a particular focus on live performances.
How would you describe yourself as a performer?
How would I describe myself as a performer? A visual performer. I don't think of myself as a dynamic showman. I have a kind of a bitey sense of humor, and it comes out a lot. It shows. I try to curb it a little bit. I don't want the uninitiated to think I'm a dick, So yeah, it's like a personal romp into my my story room, and I treat it as such.
How naked have you ever stood?
Oh, I've stood very naked. Once when I was performing at Metro with Chalk Mool in like 87, I think, I tripped over some cables on stage, and the entire crotch of my pants ripped out, and I was commando. So I basically just held my stuff with my hands and finished the set, and was glad now that there was no camera phones back then, because there was some unwitting exposure going on there. So that's about as naked as I've ever been. I'm not I'm not like a Gibby Haynes sort of guy to get on stage naked in a grass skirt smeared with mud. That sounds fun, but that's more of a Gibby thing.
Speaking of performances, Mark Panick's band Razorhouse is going to play a live show a couple of days after our interview. But again, the venue is not revealed as part of the announcement on the band's website.
How secret is a secret?
How secret is marketing? Yeah, right. I know. It planned on being that, and then it just, the genie got out, and but what I wanted to avoid doing was make a big hubbub about that first show. We wanted to sort of roll out. We have some new stuff to roll out, and not the material so much, but new gear and everything. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to, maybe screw up in public and, oh, okay, start again. I don't think that will happen, but it's always good to have contingency plans.
How cool would it be to do an entire tour of secret places?
I would love that. I like that idea. I'm fascinated by hobo code. You know what hobo code? And I mean, all my bands, the Bone Minute Barumba, even Razorhouse to a great extent, there's all encoded message in the graphics and all of it. There's Easter eggs. If you know me, you can follow them. And if you get to know me, you can follow them. But, that's one of the things we use in the new vinyl. It's a gatefold, and inside there's a game board, and it's loosely based on the Popol Vuh, the Mayan Book of Life, and then it's also based on the band's history too. So we take you through the whole thing, and it's more a journey than a game. It's a spiritual journey than but it involves chapters and bits from the Popol Vuh mixed up with our lore and mishmash hybrid. It's what I do.
Eventually, Mark Panick and I explore Chicago through some questions I have for him as a Chicagoan.
What is the recipe for your favorite Chicago dish?
Oh, what's the recipe for my favorite Chicago dish? I'm a big fan of the Chicago classics. I like a good Italian beef sandwich. And a recipe, my recipe would be go down to Taylor Street and get one. And the pizza, I like Chicago tavern style pizza, thin but not too thin. Those are about as Chicago as you can get. And then once you start nowadays, though, once you get into the neighborhoods, oh boy, there's some real good Chicago Mexican food, real good Chicago, all kinds of food now. Narweez, Garab Narweez, which is like a Pakistani street food place up on the north side. Oh my God, fabulous. And it's like filled with cab drivers, so it's the real deal.
In downtown Chicago, when you stand in front of the Chicago Picasso, what does it look like to you?
It always looked like Griddle from the children's show, The Great Space Coaster. And he was some kind of space puppet monkey. And he always looked like Griddle from The Great Space Coaster.
Finally, it is time to wrap up our wonderful conversation, as Mark Panick puts it. And so the end of my interview with him deviates a little bit from the usual routine of having a Chicagoan, or a Chicago musician, read a poem written by another Chicagoan, frequently Carl Sandburg. In this case, I've decided to choose a poem written by E. Cummings, which, I believe, is a better match for Mark and his work. And the story goes on from there.
My name is Mark Panick. I'm going to read a poem by E. Cummings. Spring is like a perhaps hand. Spring is like a perhaps hand which comes carefully out of nowhere, arranging a window into which people look while people stare, arranging and changing and placing carefully, there a strange thing and a known thing here, and changing everything carefully. Spring is like perhaps a hand in a window, carefully to and fro moving, new and old things, while people stare carefully, moving perhaps a fraction of a flower here, placing an inch of air there, and without breaking anything.